11, everybody. Tyrone Bowman live. Welcome to the program on tonight. Have a lot to unpack, a lot to talk about. Um, First of all, as we begin on tonight, I want to thank you for all of you all that hung in there with me throughout the presidential campaign, pros and cons, ups and downs, etc. And for those of you who have subscribed to the channel, thank you for subscribing. So before I get into the topic that I'm going to talk about tonight, let's talk about the big donkey in the room, the Democrats, and why they lost this election. It's pure and simple. The Democrats lost this election because you got trumped. Got to give it to him. He played his hand, and he played it well. Well organized, well thought out. Strategy was excellent. They did a magnanimous job. It reminds me of a football game. You know, they're the quote unquote official political champions. Second term in the White House for now elect President Trump. Democrats, you played around too long. And you know what the pathetic thing is? You all left Kamala Harris out there all by herself. You took black people for granted. You took the black vote for granted. And you thought because black people traditionally voted Democratic, the ticket in the past, that it would continue to always be there for you. Not so anymore. A lot of things that you could have addressed, y'all could have addressed on your political platform, y'all decided not to do it. Especially the grievances of black males who really believed and felt as though that then Attorney General Harris out in San Francisco did grave injustices to black men. Even though she ran a flawless campaign, but the Democrats, you dropped the ball. You didn't support her. Y'all didn't fight for her. Especially the black males, the black men in politics. Where were y'all pathetic behinds at? You weren't out there on the forefront campaigning for her. You weren't speaking up for her. You weren't defending her. You all just left her there by herself. And she only had 3 months to pull it together. And she came up against a formidable opponent. And the sad thing about it is, now that you all have this fractured Democratic Party, what are you going to do? You better get it together or you're going to continue to lose national elections. You lost the Senate, you lost the House, you lost the presidency. So now, what a lot of folks don't understand is that when you are dealing with a political opponent, you can't play nice. You can't play pretty. You can't be articulate. You got to fight fire with fire. And a lot of the policies y'all should have had on the platform, you blew it. And you know what? Because I did the research. That's what I've been doing over the past several days. You know how many black males voted for Trump? You know how many Latinos voted for Trump? You know how many women voted for him? That's why he won the election. So instead of y'all feeling pathetic and sorry for yourselves, you need to get together, reorganize, regroup, take the L, admit that you lost, deal with it as grown men and grown women. And he told you from the very beginning what his policies were going to be like, what his agenda was going to be like. I told you many times here on this program that you all need to have your own political podcast, but y'all wouldn't do it. You waited for mainstream media to come to your aid. They betrayed you. How did they betray you? They gave all the coverage and everything to Trump. Not enough to Harris. And Republicans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year through Fox and through Fox, to all the political conservatives on radio. Where are the Democratic voices on radio articulating your cause? Y'all better get your behinds together, because you got midterm elections coming up soon. You still have a chance to get some things done. And nobody is going to vote for the Democratic Party just because their grandmothers or their grandfathers or uncles and aunts did anymore. That time is over. If you're not offering black people something at the table, we ain't voting for you. It's just that simple. Now tonight, congratulations to now-elect President Trump. With me, this has never been personal, just politics. That's it. You know. So congratulations on order to him. Congratulations on order to his team. Don't get mad because the man won. He played a better hand, and they played it well. To the victor goes the spoils of war. That's how it is. You're already on day one what they're going to do, be a dictator for a day. I already told you that there's going to be mass deportation that's going to take place. And I warned y'all, and I told you all day and night about Project 2025, but you didn't listen. You didn't want to believe it. So tonight we're going to talk about Project 2025. Let's break it down, all right, point by point. So, according to CBS News, they did a good and thorough report about it. What is Project 2025? Now, listen, y'all, this was written, I think they tried to update it on November 7th, but this was written some time ago, all right? So what is Project 2025? What to know about the conservative blueprint for a second Trump administration. And the headline read, and now I'm going to say, I'm going to, in parentheses, I'm going to take out the word former, and I'm going to say with now-elect President Donald Trump, who defeated Vice President Kamala Harris in the race for the White House. There was a policy agenda crafted in the run-up to the election that its organizers say is ready for the next Republican to hold the presidency, called Project 2025. The blueprint was invoked by President Biden, Harris, and other Democrats throughout the campaign as they sought to sound the alarm about what could be in store if Trump won a second term in the White House, which he now has. So the former president, he has won, securing more than 270 electoral votes needed to secure the presidency, because y'all played around too much. So let's get into Project 2025. Overseen by the Conservative Heritage Foundation, the multi-pronged initiative includes a detailed blueprint for the next Republican president to usher in a sweeping overhaul of the executive branch. Remember Steve Bannon? I think it was about a week ago, a week before the campaign, he was released from prison, and he held that fiery press conference, and he told you all what the agenda was going to be. He said everything he meant, and he meant everything he said. So Trump and his campaign worked to distance themselves originally from Project 2025 in the months leading up to Election Day. So Project 2025 is a proposed presidential transition project that is composed of 4 pillars: a policy guide for the next presidential administration and Lincoln Down-style database of personnel who could serve in the next administration, training for that pool of candidates dubbed the Presidential Administration Academy and a playbook of actions to be taken within the first 180 days in office. And let me say this, because I'm going to be fair. Throughout his administration, I'll be doing a lot of reporting, and I'm just going to tell it the way it is. You know, Democrats, you messed up. So I mean, I don't know what anything else to say about the Democrats. You know, I'm going to look for all the positives that the Trump administration is doing, and I'm going to highlight them, and I'm going to talk about it. That's the bottom line. And if you all get your act together, you may win the White House back in 2028. But as for now, you got to deal with it. Do the best that you can with what you got. Reorganize, restructure. Stop taking people for granted. So Project 2025 was led by two former Trump administration officials, Paul Dans, who was chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management and serves as director of the project, and Spencer Creighton, a former special assistant to Trump and now the project's associate director. Dans announced on July 30 that he would be stepping down from his role as head of Project 2025 and departing Heritage in August. Project 2025 was spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation, but includes an advisory board consisting of more than 100 conservative groups, and that includes evangelical Christians as well. Much of the focus on and criticism of Project 2025 invokes its first pillar, the nearly 900-page policy book that lays out an overhaul of the federal government called Mandate for Leadership 2025. The conservative promise, the book builds on a mandate for leadership first published in January 1981, which sought to serve as a roadmap for Ronald Reagan's incoming administration. The recommendation outlined in this sprawling plan reach every quarter of the executive branch, from the executive office of the president to the Department of Homeland Security to the little-known Export-Import Bank. Remember this term, IMF, International Monetary Fund. The Heritage Foundation also created a mandate for leadership in 2015 ahead of Trump's first term. 2 years into his presidency, it touted that Trump had instituted 64% of its policy recommendations, ranging from leaving the Paris Climate Accords, increasing military spending, and increasing offshore drilling and developing federal lands. In July 2020, the Heritage Foundation gave its updated version of the book to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. The authors of many chapters are familiar names of the Trump administration, such as Rush Vought, who led the Office of Management and Budget, former acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller, and Roger Severino, who was director of the Office of Civil Rights. Yeah, whatever. At the Department of Health and Human Services. Vought is the policy director for the 2024 Republican National Committee's Platform Committee, which adopted the platform at July's convention. A lot of y'all didn't pay attention to that, did you? Project 2025 was adopted as the platform during the Republican National Convention. And the press didn't want to talk about it. Fox and Friends didn't want to talk about it. MSNBC, CBS, nobody wanted to talk about it. John McEntee, former director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office under Trump, is a senior advisor to the Heritage Foundation, and said that the group will integrate a lot of our work with the Trump campaign when the official transition efforts are announced in the next few months. Candidates interested, listen to this. Candidates interested in applying for the Heritage Foundation's presidential personnel database are vetted on a number of political stances, such as whether they agree or disagree with statements like life has a right to legal protection from conception to natural death, and the president should be able to advance his or her agenda through the bureaucracy without hindrance from unelected federal officials. Pay attention to wording. Wording is everything. if you take out a comma, a colon, or a semicolon. Remove a period. It changes the whole meaning of the word. The contributions from ex-Trump officials have led its critics to tie Project 2025 to his then re-election campaign, though the former president has attempted to distance himself from the initiative. A line-by-line review by CBS News identified at least 270 proposals in Project 2025's published blueprint for the next Republican president that matched Trump's past policies and current campaign promises. CBS News data team extracted more than 700 specific policy proposals from Project 2025's policy guide, compared each one to policies enacted during Trump's first term, as well as his campaign platform, rally speeches, and interviews. So, what are the Project 2025's plans? Some of the policies in the Project 2025 agenda have been discussed by Republicans for years or pushed by Trump himself. Less federal intervention in education and more support for school choice. Well, we know that never worked. Work requirements for able-bodied, get your behinds off welfare. I can translate it for you, black folk. Welfare days are coming to an end. And it ain't just for black folk either. That's for white folk too. Childless adults on food stamps and a secure border with increased enforcement of immigration laws, mass deportations, and construction of a border wall. But others have come under scrutiny in part because of the current political landscape. So let's talk about abortion and social issues and recommendations for the Department of Health and Human Services. The agenda calls for the Food and Drug Administration to reverse its 24-year-old approval of the widely used abortion pill, mifepristone. Other proposed actions targeting medication abortion, including reinstating more stringent rules for mifepristone's use, which would permit it to be taken up to 7 weeks into a pregnancy, instead of the current 10 weeks, and requiring it to be dispensed in person instead of through the mail. The Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative legal group that is on the Project 2025 advisory board, I'm quite sure they're a bunch of religious zealots, was involved in a legal challenge to mifepristone's 2000 approval and more recent actions from the FDA that made it easier to obtain. But the Supreme Court rejected the case brought by a group of anti-abortion rights doctors and medical associations on procedural grounds, and misspoke, the Alliance Defending Freedom. The policy book also recommends the Justice Department enforce the Comstock Act. So what is that? Against providers and distributors of abortion pills. That 1873 law prohibits drugs, medicines, or instruments used in abortions from being sent through the mail. Does that include all the Republicans who will get their mistresses pregnant and their girlfriends? And you know they're going to make them have abortions, right? Come on. There's great hypocrisy within the Republican Party. Seriously. Let's not kid ourselves. We're grown people here. Now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, the volume states that the Justice Department in the next conservative administration should therefore announce its intent to enforce federal law against providers and distributors of such pills. The guide recommends the next Secretary of Health and Human Service get rid of the Reproductive Health Care Access Task Force established by the Biden administration before Roe's reversal and create a pro-life task force to ensure that all of the department's divisions seek to use their authority to promote life and health of women and their unborn children. So, meaning, because there's a lot of incest and rape and things that happen, so they don't want them to get abortion. They want them to carry the child of an incestuous relationship. In a section titled The Family Agenda, the proposals recommends the Health and Human Services chief proudly state that men and women are biological realities, and that married men and women are the ideal natural family structure because all children have a right to be raised by the men and women who conceive them. Well, that's just not going to happen like that. And you can try to enforce that all you want. It's not like that because a lot of people come from single parent households, and you can't make people get married if they don't want to get married. There are a lot of people who are married, they're in miserable, loveless marriages. You know? Further, a program within the Health and Human Services Department should maintain a biblically, listen, I told you these evangelicals are up in this thing, should maintain a biblically based social science reinforced definition of marriage and family. During his first 4 years in office, Trump banned transgender people from serving in the military. Mr. Biden reversed that policy, but the Project 2025 policy book calls for the ban to be reinstated, which I'm quite sure it will be. So the next part is targeting federal agencies, employees, and policies. The agenda takes aim at long-standing federal agencies like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. The agency is a component of the Commerce Department, and the policy guide calls for it to be downsized. NOAA's 6 offices, including the National Weather Service and National Marine Fisheries Service, form a colossal operation that has become one of the main drivers of the climate change alarm industry, and as such is harmful to future U.S. prosperity, the guide states. Well, I think Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to be put in charge of the environmental stuff like that, according to some reports that I read. That's his payoff for supporting Trump. The Department of Homeland Security, established in 2002, should be dismantled, and its agency either combined with others or moved under the purview of other departments altogether. The policy book states, for example, immigration-related entities from the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, and Health and Human Services should form a stand-alone cabinet-level border and immigration agency staffed by more than 100,000 employees, according to the agenda. Well, they're not going to get those jobs unless they pledge allegiance to Trump. You believe that? Now what? Y'all think I'm playing, don't you? I'm not playing. I'm telling you the truth. They're either going to pledge allegiance to him over the Constitution, or they're not going to be able to work for him. If the policy recommendations are implemented, another federal agency that could come under the knife by the next administration with action from Congress is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The agency seeks to bring a push by conservatives to target diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI initiatives in higher education to the executive branch by wiping away a slew of DEI-related positions, policies, and programs, and calling for the elimination of funding for partners that promote DEI practices, meaning no black people should ever have a job in his administration. No black people should ever be entitled to any help whatsoever. That's exactly what that means. You can come up with all the fancy terms that you want. And just for the record, by the time Trump gets out of office, I'll be a full-fledged lawyer by then. I'm in the middle of it right now. It states that U.S. Agency for International Development staff and grantees that engage in ideological agitation on behalf of the DEI agenda should be terminated. At the Treasury Department, the guide says the next administration should treat the participation in any critical race theory or DEI initiative without objecting on constitutional moral grounds as per se grounds for termination of employment. In other words, you can be fired for just even talking about slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and things of that nature. I would never work for the government. You couldn't pay me to work for the government. I wouldn't care what the job paid. I'd turn it down. I would never want to be a government employee under any circumstances or conditions. You cannot erase history. You can try to erase it all you want. History is history. I was in downtown Philadelphia on yesterday, coming through what It used to be old Philadelphia with the cobblestones and things of that nature. And I happened to be walking by the Constitution Center. And I saw a tourist guide there talking to people from different countries about things. And I happened to look at some very disturbing pictures. They had pictures of my ancestors as slaves. Some artists painted them as being happy, docile, compliant slaves, laughing and talking like they were so happy to be in slavery. That's called whitewashing of history. So the Project 2025 policy book also takes aim at more innocuous factions of government. It calls for the next presidential administration to eliminate or reform the dietary guidelines that have been published by the Department of Agriculture for more than 40 years, which the authors claim have been infiltrated by issues like climate change and sustainability. Let's get to immigration. That's the biggie. Trump made immigration a cornerstone of his last two presidential runs and has continued to hammer the issue, which he did during his 2024 campaign. Project 2025's agenda not only recommends finishing the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, but urges the next administration to take a creative and aggressive approach to responding to drug cartels at the border. This approach includes using active duty military personnel and the National Guard to help with arrest operations along the southern border. Got to get it under control. No argument there, no problem whatsoever. It's got to be dealt with. A memo from Immigration and Customs Enforcement that prohibits enforcement actions from taking place at sensitive places like schools, playgrounds, and churches should be rolled back, the policy guide states. When the Homeland Security Secretary determines there is an actual or anticipated mass migration of aliens, immigrants, black people, that presents urgent, in quotation marks, circumstances, quote, close quote, warranting a federal response, the agenda says the Secretary can make rules and regulations, including through their expulsion for as long as necessary. These rules, the guide states, aren't subject to the Administration Procedure Act, which govern the agency rule-making process. What do Trump and his advisors say about Project 2025? In a post to his social media platform on July 5, Trump wrote, quote, "I knew nothing about Project 2025. I have no idea who is behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Anything they do, I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them," close quote. Trump's pushback to the initiative came after Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts said in a podcast interview that the nation is in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. Then former President Trump continued to disavow the initiative in social media posts, insisting that he knows nothing about Project 2025. And he repeated that message during the debate with Vice President Kamala Harris on September 10. "I have nothing to do with Project 2025. He said, "I haven't read it. I don't want to read it. Purposefully, I'm not going to read it," quote, close quote. In response to Dan's exit from Project 2025, Trump's campaign said the initiative had nothing to do with the campaign, did not speak for the campaign, and should not be associated with the campaign or the president in any way. Well, Steve Bannon counter-attacks this because he said they're going to enact everything in the Project 2025 book that has been outlined. So, I am just presenting the facts. You all make your own decisions. Reports of Project 2025's demise would be greatly welcomed and should serve as a notice to anyone or any group trying to misrepresent the influence with President Trump in his campaign. It will not end well for you, said Susie Wiles and Chris Savita, senior advisors on the Trump campaign. That's a direct threat. You can't threaten people because people disagree with you. Everybody has a right to First Amendment speech, not just the Republicans. Everybody. Everybody's First Amendment rights have to be protected. Not just one group of people. This is a democracy. While the former president, while Trump said he doesn't know who is in charge of the initiative, the project's outgoing director, Dan's, and associate director, Cretin, were high-ranking officials in his administration. Additionally, Ben Carson, whatever. Ben Carson was nobody anyway. He used to be a brilliant surgeon. And where did they stick him at? He got put in charge of HUD, Housing, Urban, and Development. That's the same thing Reagan did with Pierce when Pierce was in the Reagan administration. Wasn't even a cabinet level position. He put Pierce in charge of HUD. Nobody wanted to be in charge of that lousy organization. So Ben Carson, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Trump, John Ratcliffe, former Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration, and Peter Navarro, who served as a top trade advisor to Trump in the White House, are listed as either authors or contributors to the policy agenda. No doubt Uncle Remus Ben Carson had a lot to do with it. Still, even before Roberts' comments during the War Room podcast, typically hosted by conservative commentator Steve Bannon, who reported to, he went to federal prison. He stayed there for 4 months. So now he's out. He was one of Trump's top campaign advisors and stressed that Project 2025 has no official ties to his re-election bid. Bannon lied. Wiles and Civia said in a November statement that 2025 policy announcements will be made by Trump or his campaign. Any personal lists, policy agendas, or government plans published anywhere were merely suggestions, they said. While the efforts by outside organizations are appreciated, Wiles and Civitia said none of these groups or individuals speak for Trump or his campaign. In response to Trump's post in July, Project 2025 reiterated that it was separate from Trump's campaign lie. As we've been saying for more than 2 years now, Project 2025 does not speak for any candidate or campaign. We are a coalition of more than 110 conservative groups advocating policy and personnel recommendations for the next conservative president. But it is ultimately up to that president, who we believe will be President Trump, to decide which recommendations to implement, a statement on the project's X account said on July 5th. The initiative has also pushed back on Democrats' claims about its policy proposals and accused them of lying about what the agenda contains. So, I'm going to leave you here with part one. We'll continue with part two. What I like to do, I like to give space and time for videos to circulate so individuals can take time, to look at stuff and examine it and listen to it for themselves. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching on tonight. Thank you for your comments. So once again, congratulations to now-elect President Trump, who won the battle. He won the war. And so all you Democrats who wanted to have him locked up, ain't gonna happen. Know that. Get some rest, brother. So, till next time, never surrender, never